Welcome to Mind Meets Body and Soul, a podcast that connects the dots between clinical mental health and spiritual holistic wellness. I'm Heather, a licensed clinical social worker and mental health guru.
And I'm Devon, a Reiki master, spiritual teacher, and lover of all things woo-woo. We're here to discuss various wellness topics, highlighting the connection between the mind, body, and soul.
We'll be offering nuggets of wisdom from each of our fields with the ultimate goal of bridging the gap between our two worlds. Whether you lean more into cognitive psychology
or flow with the woo-woo waters, we're here to help you prioritize yourself and unlock a fresh perspective to healing, growth, and expansion. We're so excited you're here. Let's jump in. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Mind Meets Body and Soul, episode 10. This is Devon DeGilio. Happy to be here with you all, here with my lovely co-host.
Hi, everyone. Heather Raffanello. So excited to be here, bringing you another episode, another fun topic that we're going to be discussing. I think this is really cool because I'm finding this is our 10th episode, and every episode thus far almost feels like a building block to the next one. Like they're very connected, and a lot of the things that we're talking about feed into one another. We're always referring back to previous episodes. So I'm excited to bring this episode and this topic to you all to just further deepen the connection between everything that we've been talking about and build that solid foundation.
I fully agree with you. I feel like we are telling a story, or I feel like this is like any good like therapy or Reiki healing session where each session just builds off of the episode before then. So not that you have to be listening to these episodes in chronological order. You can tune into whichever episode calls out to you in any moment. But for those of you who have been listening along in chronological order, hopefully you are seeing those connections and those tie-ins there.
So Devon, share with us our topic for today.
All right, topic for today, we're going to start off making a connection between a show that you and I shamelessly both enjoy, tying it back to this theme of acceptance. So, Heather, you and I shamelessly watch the reality TV show on Netflix, Selling Sunset. And what we found is that you and I actually just binged the new season in the same exact weekend, not knowing at all. But of course, that's just how we roll, always on the same wavelength.
Yeah, we are. We're definitely like syncing up, which is a lot of fun. I'm excited to get into this topic, and I think it's one that I talk about with my clients all the time. So catch the audience up on what you're referring to.
Yep. So spoiler alert, but like not really. Don't worry, we're not going to be recapping the entire show for you, but there's a piece to that show, a dynamic or a relationship in the show that comes up throughout the season that we think would be really helpful to speak to when it comes to this topic of acceptance. And that is the relationship between the characters. I say characters as if it's not a reality show, but between the people, Chelsea and Brie. So we have Chelsea, who's been with The Office for quite some time, and we have Brie, who comes in as a new agent this season. Automatically, you see, and again, this is from a reality TV show standpoint, so who knows what is dramatized, what is edited, but right away you see them kind of butting heads. And we meet Brie, who has just had a baby with Nick Cannon. She is one of the many women who have had children with Nick Cannon. And to Chelsea, that relationship dynamic between Brie and her baby daddy, Nick Cannon, is very confusing, and to her, a little disturbing as well. In the show, what's portrayed is that Chelsea has this difficult time even accepting Brie for who she is, or accepting her as an addition to the office, as a potential friend, because she gets so caught up in the ways in which she doesn't agree with it. And you see her inability to accept Brie coming as a product of her inability to understand, or her desire to understand and not being able to understand.
Yeah, I think she's not understanding, but I also think it comes out that she's like deeply triggered by Bree's dynamic because of her childhood dynamic and how she grew up. So she can't, I'm not going to say can't because she could get there, but she's struggling to accept it because she doesn't understand it. She is triggered by it. She's too like emotionally attached.
Exactly. Thank you, therapist Heather, coming out there. I think that's why we love this show, right? Because we get to analyze, everything, the dynamics that are going on. But beyond that, beyond the show is the psychological, emotional piece behind that. And so that brings us to this theme of acceptance. And so, what I would really like to do during this episode is bring up this topic of acceptance and discuss this topic of acceptance on that micro level, acceptance within ourselves or within our personal lives, and then also bring it outwards, acceptance on a community, societal, universal level. So, Heather, acceptance on the personal or on the individual level, what does that look like in your field?
Acceptance is a really big topic for me in therapy. Clients are coming to me to change, or they're struggling with something, or they have some sort of barrier or challenge a lot of times. So there's this thing called a choice point where you're like at this basically fork in the road and you have the choice to decide like which path am I going to take. So a lot of times I'm breaking down these conversations with clients and asking, is there anything you can do? Like what's within your control in this situation? Is there something that you can change or do differently to change the outcome? Or is this problem out of your control, which it a lot of times is? And is it something that we have to work to just accept? There's a type of therapy called radical acceptance, which is like a distress tolerance type of therapy, basically to help us understand that like pain in life is inevitable, suffering is optional. So we oftentimes create these bigger issues or bigger problems because we're fighting against something, or like you've said, Devon, we're like that we're getting this resistance and we just keep like pushing against it and things aren't changing. So radical acceptance, or just acceptance in general, is so important in therapy because it takes the pressure off. It almost like takes the lid off this thing that's like festering and bothering us. If we can work to accept it, we don't have to like it. We don't have to agree with it. We don't have to understand it, but we can choose to accept it. And that basically just gives us like peace around it.
I fully agree with you. One thing that you said just kind of like lit up a light bulb in my head. You said this, and I've said this before too, is that pain is inevitable, right? As human beings, we're always, you know, in one way or another going to experience pain, but that suffering is a choice. And that realization right there for me personally and also professionally just kind of lit up like oh wow, I actually have more power in my experiences in handling or experiencing pain than I thought I did. And so I love what you bring in, that choice piece, because acceptance is a choice. And I think so often we have difficulty accepting the things that we don't understand. And so we place that emphasis on needing to understand something before we accept something. Like you said, coming to that fork in the road where you have a decision to make, right? And you're evaluating whether something is within your control or without. We don't like when we are not in control or when we don't have control of a scenario, right? That kicks up our nervous system, that just like throws us out of whack. So I'm with you there, that acceptance piece before any type of understanding or trying to control a scenario, that acceptance piece is really what needs to come first, with the purpose or the intention of experiencing a greater level of peace.
Right. Like I think to me, the goal of acceptance is to create peace, like, and this feeling of calm in this world that feels so painful and so chaotic. So to me, they're almost synonymous, the two: calm, peace, and acceptance. Like we spoke in one of our episodes previously about like this sanctuary. Like I think acceptance is a step to get to this place of like a sanctuary and peace.
I fully agree with you. And I actually use it similarly. I have these like pillars in my mind, and acceptance is like the very first step to getting to love, to getting to happiness. It's acceptance of what is. And something else that you mentioned too with acceptance is that when we accept, it doesn't mean like I give in or I fully agree with whatever it is going on, whether that's on like that individual level of feeling like you're in a crappy place right now, right? Like accepting that you're in a crappy place. It doesn't mean that you just allow it to happen to you, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And I think what you're mentioning is important to say too, because acceptance also does not mean indifference. What we're talking about here is like two different things. I think a lot of times people will come into therapy and they're like, I'm toast. Like, I'm too exhausted. I can't care or I don't care anymore. Acceptance isn't not caring. Acceptance is like this peaceful place where we acknowledge how something is and we're choosing not to fight against it. Whereas indifference is almost like this distance where I'm too tired or I've given too much and I'm almost burnt out and I'm unable to give any more or care. So I just want to highlight too that very important difference where like acceptance is a choice, indifference or not caring is something that I think we almost get to when we've given too much or we're like too well done. Does that make
Absolutely.
sense?
Yeah, yeah, I get this visual right now. Like, I don't know why this little like cartoon is in my head of somebody who's just kind of like laying on their back, like on the ground, just like as you said, like kind of had enough. And that acceptance piece, what I see is like that person being like, okay, I'm going through a hard time right now. I'm gonna let myself like, just wallow for a moment and then reevaluate, as opposed to that indifference is just like almost like like, there's no consciousness going on there. It's just laying, or even with your consciousness, then you're like, I'm just going to keep laying here and doing nothing. Right?
Right.
Does that make
Acceptance
sense?
is, yeah. No, it makes a lot of sense because acceptance is really hard work. Like, it's not an easy thing for us, at least from my perspective. It's not always easy for us to like let go of like that control and work to like accept how it is. I think it's way easier for us to be petty or righteous or self-sabotaging even because we feel like we're doing something. We have that like control piece, whereas acceptance is really where we're like letting go of the wheel and not giving up control, but we're just acknowledging like I can't keep fighting this same battle because it's going nowhere. It's not working. I think we've talked before about like the definition of insanity, right? Is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So acceptance is like, okay, I'm not going to keep doing the same thing because that's not working, but I can choose to like walk away, do something different, even if I don't like it and even if it
Yep.
doesn't feel good.
So what does that look like in sessions with clients where you're working with them on acceptance on that individual level?
It sounds funny, but there's actually a lot of grief work that comes with acceptance. And what I mean by that is like grieving what we thought would be, or like if we're working on accepting ourselves or a relationship for how it is, we have to like see it and really truly acknowledge it almost from like a neutral perspective. A lot of times we try to take off the emotion and almost look at it from a more factual perspective. And then we have to grieve our expectations. We have to feel those emotions and what comes up in thinking about letting things go. There's also a lot of frustration that we have to work through because we might not be ready to accept it. Maybe there's more that I feel like I have to do. Maybe I feel like I have to try one or two more things before I can get to this place of acceptance. So it's really trying to gauge where this person is at or how ready they are to accept, and that kind of determines like what the work actually looks like.
That's huge. And I think making that emotional connection to acceptance is really important. As you were sharing this, what came up in my mind is, how some people will just be like, it is what it is, right? It's a very mental way of coming to acceptance, but more in a dismissive way, right? Like you say, it is what it is. It's almost just like shoving it away, pushing it away, not acknowledging that there is like an emotional component to what it is that you are trying to, hoping to, or having a challenge with accepting. So I love that. I hadn't thought of that either, is like bringing in that emotional component and allowing yourself to feel the sadness or feel the confusion while at the same time accepting that something is as it is.
I have a really hard time accepting things that don't feel fair. Like if it's not fair, I'm like, I don't want to accept it because that doesn't feel, what's the word I'm looking for? That doesn't feel, it feels passive. It almost feels like I'm giving up. And I think that's sometimes a big stuck point for a lot of people that I work with too, is like, if I accept this, am I allowing this to happen? Am I giving the green light? Am I like enabling this type of behavior that I don't agree with or that I don't understand? And I think that's where there's a lot of work too, is really getting in the weeds there and seeing and kind of teasing out, it can be not fair, it can be wrong, and you can still choose not to keep fighting a battle that isn't serving you. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's where two truths that are in direct conflict with each other can exist at the same time.
And that brings me right back to this episode of, or this season of Selling Sunset with Chelsea and with Bree, because here you have this battle, this internal battle that Chelsea is facing, where it's like, I don't understand this dynamic. I don't understand it. I don't understand it. I also don't agree with it. But you can see how it just continues to cause a rift in the relationship, in the office dynamic. And you have Bree on the other side of that being like, I don't need you to understand. I don't need you to like what I'm doing. This is my
Mm-hmm.
family dynamic. Bree is the one who's asking or just emphasizing that Chelsea just needs to accept it as it is. And that's that, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Because otherwise they're just going to keep fighting. So, like, it's either stay as it is and continue to battle with each other, or accept and acknowledge that this is how it is. And I'm not going to be able to do anything to change it, nor is fighting this battle helping us. So, I'm going to choose that other path now and try to do my own healing and acceptance around that.
And as you mentioned too with the episode, like not only was it just this woman has a who has an opinion on another woman's family dynamic and is judging her based on that. There is that emotional component to it too. She feels very triggered by this choice that this other woman has made because it brings up painful memories of the way in which she grew up, being in a split household, having her parents in two different places and not being able to receive that emotional support. So that part of it is very valid. But I think sometimes we almost have to start at that mental level of like, okay, first I can accept. Then, as you said, then in comes that emotional component of like, okay, then I can let myself figure out the internal world, figure out what's triggering me. But I don't have to let that get in the way of me accepting that something is, or that somebody has a different perspective, a different lifestyle than I do, or than one that I agree with.
So, what then, Devon, do you do in your work with clients to help or like work on this acceptance piece?
Honestly, the same exact way. Everything that we spoke about, everything that you just mentioned that you do with your clients in one way or another is exactly what I do, which is really cool just to see the parallels as we keep finding the parallels between your field and my field. And on the macro level, then a lot of my clients that are coming to me are the ones who are very energetically sensitive, right? The empaths, the people who are super compassionate, and they're feeling like the pain, or they're feeling the heaviness or the density of the energy around, right? There's so much inequality that we experience in our world today. And so, on that spiritual level of like bringing your awareness to all that's going on around you, it is challenging to accept, right? To accept that there's so much inequality, to accept that people are being treated unfairly, because with it comes so much pain. So again, coming back to that emotional connection that you brought in of like, yeah, there is going to be a grieving process with that acceptance, but first let's work to accept. And acceptance is simply that acknowledgement. Things are unfair right now. People have different viewpoints. I don't understand it, but I can accept it. And then also bringing in the boundary component, right? Like deciding or choosing whether or not you associate yourself with someone or with some idea or with some group or community. You have that choice.
I'm having a light bulb moment, and I'm thinking that like we like to think that in order to get to this place of acceptance, we have to notice, acknowledge, understand, and then accept. And I think we actually have to notice, acknowledge, and accept. We don't have to have that understanding piece that's in there. And the aha moment that I'm having is like, that's actually no different than how I coach people through feeling their emotions, like, and accepting how we're feeling, because we have to notice the feeling. We have to acknowledge it. Where is it happening in my body? What's going on? What am I thinking? And then acceptance, because emotions are also irrational, illogical things that don't always make sense. I think we lean so much on this understanding piece because it gives us a sense of control. That's us and our like ego and our human self trying to get in there and be
Mm-hmm.
like, all right, let me dissect this. Let me do something here. And the hardest part about acceptance is that sometimes we just can't, especially on a macro level. I think on a macro level, when there's an injustice and these things that like we so wholeheartedly disagree with, or we're such an empath that we so deeply feel these things, it's even harder because we want so badly to be able to do something. And I think the acceptance is just sitting in those feelings and like allowing them to happen. And then like I'm fine with making a list. What can I control versus what can't I control? What can I do? What can't I do? And the what we can do stuff, do it. Like go out and use those emotions as motivation and energy to get something done. But then the things that you can't do, that's where we have to sit with those feelings and grieve them and feel them and acknowledge them.
I love that light bulb moment. And it brings me right to meditations that I often lead clients or groups through. And you're so right. In those moments, it's all about being still, as you say, paying attention on purpose, right? Bringing your awareness to everything that's going on. And then when it comes to those emotions, like noticing that those emotions are there, noticing what is there, and accepting that they're there. I always say without judgment, just being an observant or being a witness to those emotions. And then from that place of acceptance, then seeking to understand them. And I think that's where the healing comes from on that macro level. I mean, look at where we are this past month, Mental Health Awareness Month. This month, we are celebrating honoring LGBTQIA plus month. So we're in a time right now of radical acceptance for the things that we may not understand. And it is my belief, my opinion, that if we worked to just accept that people have different perspectives, different preferences, without needing to understand and without needing to feel like you have to agree with a perspective or a preference that is different from yours, I think that on a collective level, we would experience so much more harmony.
Yeah, it's harmony, it's peace, and it all is rooted in acceptance.
I agree. And when I think about it, when I think about the possibility of people just living in radical acceptance, it honestly brings me peace. It makes me feel peaceful inside because we're not fighting. We're not trying to take rights away from people. We're not trying to tell somebody you're wrong. The way that you think, feel, believe, love is wrong. So yeah, I want that deeply for us on the collective level. And I think it starts as everything on that individual level. So if there's one thing that our audience takes away from this episode is start with yourself, bringing acceptance into your life, into whatever it is that you are experiencing, and then work your way out to the macro level.
Mm-hmm. I think that's what people are meaning when they say, like, I see you. It's I see you and all of you, and I accept you. I don't have to agree with you. I don't have to understand, but I'm choosing to accept you and see you for all that you are. And I think that's a beautiful thing, to be completely honest with you. I love that.
Me too. And with that, I think we wrap
Yay.
up this episode on acceptance. I think it was an
Mm-hmm.
important one. Started off talking about a reality TV show, and here a solution for world peace.
What a full circle moment. But let me tell you, I love a reality TV show. I'm like the Bravo queen. So I'll talk about reality TV, Devon, anytime you want.
And you'll just put on your therapist hat throughout the way and like find all the ways that we
Right.
could, or all the tips and tools for therapy, for
Right. And if we
healing.
solve world peace along the way, like even better.
Exactly. So with that, Heather, I think it is your turn this week, or is it my turn this week? No, I think it's your turn. It's my
I
turn.
think it's your turn. It's your turn.
Okay.
I went last week with celebrating you and being proud. So you're up.
Okay. Well, the one thing that caught my eye right away was just one simple word, and it's world. And it's in the part of my vision board that has to do with my like long-term goals. And I know for myself personally with my business, like I want to create that impact in the world. I want to reach people worldwide. And so I love
Mm-hmm.
how this conversation that we had on acceptance, yes, we talk about it on the individual level. We also very much talk about it on the world or on the universal level. So it fits.
Mm-hmm. It's perfect. It's beautiful. So we are still playing around with the Q&A feature on Spotify. So if anybody's out there listening through Spotify, at the end of this episode, you'll be prompted with a poll or a question. So we'd love to see you guys engage there and get some feedback for you. So stay tuned and look out for that if you're listening on Spotify.
Yes, I noticed we had a recent submission to that Q&A. So I love seeing our audience interacting with these episodes, letting us know what lands for you or what resonates with you. We are also playing around with the idea of centering a whole episode around questions that you might have, whether that is questions you have in regards to anything that Heather or I do, any questions that you have regarding any topics that we've spoken to, or suggestions for future topics. Drop them in. We'll be adding at the end of this episode down on Spotify, that in the poll area, just a Q&A where you can ask your questions. We will also be, from the day that this episode airs and probably the week into the week, we'll be sharing a link for you to ask your questions both on our own individual Instagram pages as well as the Mind Meets Body and Soul Instagram page. So hop on over to Instagram, drop your questions, comments, whatever they are, and we'll spend an episode probably in the next month going through and answering the questions that you have.
Yay.
As always, another great episode, Heather. I look forward each and every week to these episodes, and we'll see you next week.
Yay. Thanks, everybody. Talk soon.
Bye.
We are so glad that you took the time to share this space with us. We'll be releasing new episodes of Mind Meets Body and Soul every Tuesday, so be sure to give us a follow and share this podcast with those you love.
To connect with us and join our communities, head to the show notes where you'll find our contact information and individual websites. Until next week, stay grounded, keep growing, and trust that everything you seek is unfolding for you.